And this is a Fox News alert. It is 9 p.m. in New York City and our nation's capital, 6 p.m. on the West Coast. It is 4 a.m. in Helsinki, Finland. And earlier today, President Trump, he went face to face with the Russian president, Vladimir Putin. Now, this is their third in-person meeting, but their first official summit. All topics were on the table today and appeared to be a no-holds-bar, open, productive, adult discussion on many of the issues between our two countries. I sat down for an interview with the president right after he met with Vladimir Putin. We're going to play that for you in just a moment. But first, a lot to get to, so sit tight for our breaking news, Helsinki edition, opening monologue. All right, President Trump is just not slowing down, and some people in the media and the left, they are having a very hard time dealing with the fact that he moves so fast. As I like to call it, it's kind of moving at the speed of Trump. Now, this was the president's 21st visit to a foreign country in just 18 months. And after today's one-on-one meeting with Vladimir Putin, the two leaders held a joint press conference. Let's take a look.
I'm here today to continue the proud tradition of bold American diplomacy. From the earliest days of our republic, American leaders have understood that diplomacy and engagement is preferable to conflict and hostility. Nothing would be easier politically than to refuse to meet, to refuse to engage, but that would not accomplish anything. As president, I cannot make decisions on foreign policy in a futile effort to appease partisan critics or the media, or Democrats who want to do nothing but resist and obstruct.
Now, both leaders, they also addressed the big elephant in the room, and that was election interference. Let's watch this.
The probe is a disaster for our country. I think it's kept us apart. It's kept us separated. There was no collusion at all. Everybody knows it. People are being brought out to the fore. So far that I know, virtually none of it related to the campaign, and they're going to have to try really hard to find somebody that did relate to the campaign. That was a clean campaign.
Now, of course, this meeting comes just days after the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein announced the indictments of 12 Russian agents who were accused of hacking the DNC and the Clinton campaign chairman, John Podesta, even though the DNC, they have refused to turn over their hacked server to the FBI. When will they turn that over? Where is that server? Now, President Trump weighed in heavily on this very issue during this joint presser. Let's take a look at this.
Let me just say that we have two thoughts. You have groups that are wondering why the FBI never took the server. Haven't they taken the server? Why was the FBI told to leave the office of the Democratic National Committee? I really believe that this will probably go on for a while, but I don't think it can go on without finding out what happened to the server. What happened to the servers of the Pakistani gentlemen that worked on the DNC? Where are those servers? They're missing. Where are they? What happened to Hillary Clinton's emails? 33,000 emails gone, just gone.
Exactly. What happened to all of those things? And tonight, many on the left, they want you to believe this alleged interference is a shocking, unprecedented turn of events. But we all know that Russia election meddling is not new at all. Now, remember, ahead of the 2016 presidential election cycle in 2014, the House Intel Committee Chairman, Devin Nunes, he issued a very stern warning about Putin's belligerent actions and attempts to denigrate the United States and, by the way, impact our 2016 election. And we also know, you can go way back to 2008, we know that Russia hacked into both the McCain campaign and even the presidential campaign of Barack Obama himself. And despite this, in 2016, when Hillary Clinton appeared to have a firm lead in the polls, just before the election, it was President Obama who laughed off any notion that American elections could possibly be tampered with. How wrong he was. You may remember this.
There is no serious person out there who would suggest somehow that you could even rig America's elections. There's no evidence that that has happened in the past, or that there are instances in which that will happen this time.
Interesting. That's when he thought Hillary was going to win. Now that Trump is president, after nearly a decade of playing down Russian interference and its impact on our elections, the left is in total freak-out mode, trying desperately to connect Russia hacking to the Trump presidency. This is a total left-wing conspiracy, a fantasy. This is the witch hunt. Every single report, every investigation into our election show absolutely no votes were changed, no more altered in the 2016 election. Not a single vote. And by the way, it's important to point out every major country in the world engages in election interference. As Senator Rand Paul put it, we all do it. And this includes the Clinton campaign. In fact, if you're looking for Russian interference, look no further than Hillary Clinton and the DNC. In 2016, they actually paid, through a law firm that they funneled money, Fusion GPS. Then they got a foreign entity, a foreign spy by the name of Christopher Steele. He put together phony opposition research, the now infamous dossier, which has been debunked, filled with lies, Russia propaganda, and all paid for by Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party to manipulate you, the American people, in the lead up to the 2016 election. Nobody in the media seems to care about Obama's attempted interference in the last Israeli election against our #1 ally in the Middle East, Israel, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And by all accounts, today's meeting, was productive and very important. As we all know, there are a lot of serious issues between the U.S. and Russia, but predictably, even before this meeting took place, yes, the Destroy Trump, Hate Trump media, they were already hoping and predicting failure. You see, success for Donald Trump is bad for their agenda, especially in the lead up to the 2018 midterm elections. Take a look.
We've never had a summit with a KGB spy master, someone who has, completely studied and examined Donald Trump, and a president who spent the weekend golfing and has not been preparing.
What do you think is going through Putin's mind, and how is he likely to be interpreting President Trump's behavior?
He's delighted. He's absolutely delighted. He wants to throw the United States off balance, and he wants to divide the United States with its allies. Mission almost accomplished.
This does not seem like a president who's really going there to really hold Putin accountable.
I just don't see how we can expect anything to come out of this and why Donald Trump is forcing the issue so much.
And it gets even worse. Take a look at this despicable cartoon. Published by the so-called paper of record, the New York Times opinion page on Twitter early this morning. Take a look.
Do you have a relationship with Vladimir Putin?
I do have a relationship with him, and I think he's done a very brilliant and amazing job. He's put himself really as, a lot of people would say he's put himself at the forefront of the world as a leader.
Now, that's your corrupt mainstream media. Pretty disgusting. Now, naturally, the anti-Trump hatred, the hysteria continued after today's meeting. Look at this. Former CIA director, the guy that was a former communist, turned CNN, paid hack, John Brennan. He actually tweeted out, Donald Trump's press conference performance in Helsinki rises to and exceeds the thresholds of high crimes and misdemeanors. It was nothing short of treasonous. Not only were Trump's comments embellic, he is wholly in the pocket of Putin. Republican patriots, where are you? John, let's address you for a second here. What have you done on Obama's watch to prevent Russia meddling? What role did you play in all this? Now, you have just undermined this country, and frankly, you should be ashamed. Let's take a look at this corruption.
We are under attack from Russia. If there were physical missiles, like during the Cuban missile crisis, Americans would be in the streets and protesting and asking for the president to protect us. These are invisible missiles.
It's time for Americans to be out on the streets and to speak up about the democracy that we hold dear, the values we hold dear, and what we expect of the President of the United States.
You have been watching perhaps one of the most disgraceful performances by an American president at a summit in front of a Russian leader, certainly that I've ever seen.
As you can see, it was all a predetermined outcome. It didn't matter what happened at today's meeting. Your mainstream media just blind hatred for President Trump, and they long predetermined that anything the president does is terrible. It's devastating, apocalyptic. And at this point, they're just a broken record. Now, on this show, we're not afraid to report that what the mainstream media will not report, and we've been proven right. We're not blinded by this same pathological hate of all things Donald Trump. Look at the economy. Look at the progress in North Korea. And while the left always acts like the sky is literally falling because Donald Trump actually wants to discuss safety and security with nuclear weapons, nuclear proliferation, Syria, Iran, and a lot of other important issues, including interference. By the way, meeting with Putin is that bad? We all know the truth. U.S. diplomacy is in good hands, in spite of what they tell you. The president has never been afraid to walk away from a bad deal. He's never been afraid to call out world leaders and hold all of them accountable. As we saw, he was critical of the British government's execution of Brexit. And by the way, he rightly called out many of our allies in NATO. Why? They're not paying their fair share for their own national defense, even criticizing the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, and her country's lucrative energy deal with Vladimir Putin's Russia, which creates a dangerous dependency on Russia in energy, which is the lifeblood of their economy. After all, if the West is so worried about Russia, well, why would they be willing to give him billions and billions of dollars to make Russia rich again? Instead, the president is now rightly pushing Germany to kill its oil and gas deals with Russia and get their energy from us in the United States, which would also mean millions of high-paying career jobs for Americans. Now, this move would not only benefit the United States, it would also absolutely wreck Russia's economy. Now, Putin should be very concerned about that possibility, as it would literally destroy Russia's economy and probably destroy him politically. We'll have more on that in a moment. Now, the president has been even more forceful with our enemies. Look at North Korea, little rocket man, fire and fury. Our button works, yours doesn't, and it's bigger. Now, despite what the media predicted, there's a real progress on the Korean Peninsula because the president's peace through strength strategy is working. It always works. Appeasement doesn't work. Bribing dictators doesn't work. Now, there hasn't been a single rocket fired in months. American hostages, thank God, they have come home. One nuclear site, in fact, has been dismantled and shuttered, and the process continues to this day. And this is something else that the mainstream media will never tell you. President Trump has been incredibly tough on Russia. This is something they won't report. Under his administration, the U.S. issued sanctions against roughly 200 individuals and entities related to Russia. Other stinging economic sanctions against Russia have also increased, and U.S. forces on the ground in Syria inflicted heavy casualties on even Russian soldiers during a skirmish earlier this year. An enormous embarrassment for Vladimir Putin. And the United States has been busy arming Ukraine with lethal weapon systems. But the media, they're not going to focus on any of this. Instead, it's Russia, 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 collusion, 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 if they're not talking about Stormy. It's all the time. It's 24/7. Now, with this as a backdrop, the president moves forward with what is very important diplomacy. And as the leader of the free world, President Trump, he must meet with the leaders of Russia, China, North Korea, and others, as long as he's not sending $150 billion in your cash and other currencies. Now, our friends, our foes, they know where we stand. They need to hear it from the commander-in-chief. There is, as you say, a new sheriff in town. Let the president negotiate deals that Obama was not capable of. And specifically, Russia must stop coordinating with the Iranian regime. They must stop supporting President Assad in Syria. And yes, they need to stop, meddling in anybody's elections and be held accountable for their actions. Now, the years of weak and feckless leadership under Obama are now over. No more cargo planes full of cash. And as President Trump frequently says, a good relationship with Putin and Russia, when you're not trying to bribe them, is a very positive thing for the country. However, under President Trump, any hostile or aggressive action by Putin's regime will be and should be met with strength, not appeasement, not bribery, not cash, not kissing the rings of dictators. And while the mainstream media and American left, as they peddle their conspiracy theories, well, the administration is now putting forth some truth and some precedent and some fact. And by the way, Reagan proved it to all of us. Peace through strength works. Diplomacy is important. Trust but verify. And the American people's safety and security, frankly, is dependent on all of this. Our kids, our grandkids, this matters. Now, following his talks with Vladimir Putin, I had the opportunity to sit down with the president right after his press conference. Here's part one of that interview. Take a look. Mr. President, great to see you.
Thank you very much, John.
You literally just finished the press conference with President Putin moments ago. A lot came up. You were very strong at the end of that press conference. You said, where are the servers? What about what Peter Strzok said? Where are the 33,000 emails? And there was this mystery answer that I think surprised a lot of people by the president of Russia as it relates to the Mueller investigation.
That's right. Well, first of all, he said there was no collusion whatsoever. I guess he said as strongly as you can say it, they have no information on Trump. It was an interesting statement, too. You know, many years ago when I was there, what was it, 13, 14, a long time ago, he said there were many, many business people there. In all fairness, I was a very successful businessman, but I was one of a lot of people. And one thing you know, if they had it, it would have been out.
He said it was nonsense.
He said it's nonsense, is right. And he also said there's absolutely no collusion, which you know, and everybody that watches your show knows. And I think most of the country knows. And Tucker, standing right over there, definitely knows because he gets it. He's one of the people that get it. But I'll tell you that I thought it was a really amazing time. Not about that. I think it's a shame. We're talking about nuclear proliferation. We're talking about Syria and humanitarian aid. We're talking about all of these different things, and we get questions on the witch hunt. And I don't think the people out in the country buy it, but the reporters like to give it a shot. I thought that President Putin was very, very strong.
Let's talk about how the day went. You actually used the term 4 hours ago that changed, right, talking about the relationship. Was it that quickly and that profound?
We had a very long meeting. And it was a good meeting. We discussed so many different things, including nuclear, including war and peace, including economic, Syria, Ukraine. We discussed many, many things. And at the end of a long period of time, I mean, it was really it was just the two of us and interpreters. And at the end of this meeting, I think we really came to a lot of good conclusions. A really good conclusion for Israel. Something very strong. He's a believer in Israel. He's a fan of Bibi, and really helping him a lot, and will help him a lot, which is good for all of us.
Let's talk about specifics that you went over as it relates to both Syria, which he has been a supporter of the Assad regime, and of course Iran, which is the #1 state sponsor of terror, fomenting proxy wars.
Right. Well, I think on Syria we're getting very close. I think it's becoming a humanitarian situation, and a lot of people are going to move back to Syria from Turkey and from Jordan and from different places. They're going to move back, less so from Europe, but they will be moving back from lots of different places. So I really think we're not very far apart on Syria. I do think that on Iran, he probably would have liked to keep the deal in place, because that's good for Russia. You know, they do business with, it's good for a lot of the countries that do business with Iran, but it's not good for this country, and it's ultimately not good for the world. And if you look at what's happening, Iran is falling apart. They have riots in all their cities. The inflation is rampant and going through the roof. And not that you want to hurt anybody, but that regime, we would let the people know that we are behind them 100%. But they're having big protests all over the country, probably as big as they've ever had before. And that all happened since I terminated that deal. So we'll see. You know, they were talking about...
Can you partner with Russia to perhaps stop the fomenting of terror, stop the proxy wars? Was that discussed?
Well, it was, and I think that would be a great thing if we could do it. Then you have some people that say, oh, you'd have to get involved with Russia. But if we can stop killing all over the place, or terrorism, we discussed radical Islamic terror at great length, because they have the problem too. We discussed ISIS. As you know, we've pretty much eradicated ISIS in the Middle East, and we've done a very strong job. He acknowledged that. But we discussed ISIS and the threat of ISIS, and basically the threat of terrorism.
Yeah. Let me go to the issue of nuclear proliferation. 2021, the START treaty would need to be extended, and also the INF as it relates to, and he did bring up the idea of missile defense. Right. Were those issues discussed, and did you make any progress?
Well, I think we're at the very beginning. It's a very important issues. To me, the most important issue is the nuclear issue, because I know President Obama said global warming is our biggest problem, and I would say that no, it's nuclear warming is our biggest problem by a factor of about 5 million. The nuclear problem, we have to make sure, we have to be very careful. And, you know, if you look at Russia and the United States, that's 90% of the nuclear weapons.
Two biggest nuclear
if we
powers.
start doing something and working on other countries, and he also said he wants to be very helpful with North Korea. We're doing well with North Korea. We have time. There's no rush. You know, it's been going on for many years, but we're doing very well. As you know, we got our hostages back. There's been no testing. There's been no nuclear explosions, which we would know in about immediately. There's been no rockets going over Japan, no missiles going over Japan. And that's now been 9 months, and the relationship is very good. You saw the nice letter he wrote. And so I think a lot of good things are happening, but President Putin is very much into making that all happen.
A lot of people in the lead up to this, obviously, you met with our NATO allies, yes. And America pays 70 cents of every dollar, and a lot of people have not lived up to their commitment as it relates to that. And also, interestingly, because a big part of NATO's mission is to prevent any hostility from Russia, and yet Angela Merkel's willing to import billions of dollars worth of their energy, up to 70%, which I would argue would make them vulnerable. And
she's paying Russia billions of dollars. Now, that's her choice. I mean, if she's going to do it, but it's a little tough when you're in NATO and you do that. I will say that I was amazed at the media because, honestly, I was there for a day and a half, and it started right when I got there, and I was very respectful, but I told people it's unfair. The United States could be paying for 91%, okay? Could be. So the minimum is 70%, but it's probably 91%. So we're paying for 91% of the cost of keeping Europe safe. On top of that, the European Union takes total advantage of us with tariffs and with trade barriers. They kill us on trade. We lost $151 billion last year. So they beat us on trade, and we defend them for essentially nothing. And I said, it's not going to be that way anymore. You got to pay up. You got to pay more.
Secretary General gave you the credit.
He gave me all of the credit. Last year, they raised $44 billion more, only because more additional. And he said it was only because of President Trump. So I figured I'd wake up the next day and read these wonderful stories. And by the way, I got along great.
Did you really believe that the media would do that?
I actually thought, finally, I'm going to have a great story. Okay, foreign relations. I'm going to have a great story. And instead of saying that I raised 44 billion, not million, 44 billion last year for NATO, I raised, could be over $100 billion this year and into the future. They said that I treated the heads of other nations rough. And I didn't. I actually have great relationships with them.
When we come back, we'll continue from Helsinki with much more of my one-on-one interview with President Trump as Hannity continues. Welcome back to Hannity as we continue from Helsinki in Finland. And this is part two of my interview with President Trump, moments after his press conference with Vladimir Putin. In the lead up to this summit, you actually tweeted out, if you were given the great city of Moscow for retribution for all the sins, etc., of Russia, the media would be asking why you didn't get St. Petersburg as well.
I said that. I said, if I got Moscow as part of a deal, they said, here's Moscow. Please pardon us. That soccer ball was really very nice. I have to say, it was very nice. You know, they did a great job in running that. But it is true. You know, I said, if I got Moscow, they'd want St. Petersburg, or they'd want more. So the media was very unfair. I never thought, this was when I said, this is foolproof. I raised $44 billion, and the Secretary General said he raised $44 billion, and it was only President Trump. Because I said, otherwise, we're going to have to start thinking about our relationship to NATO. I also said this, NATO is wonderful, but it helps Europe a lot more than it helps us. And yet we're paying for 90% of it. So I was amazed that most of the media, you didn't, and some others didn't, but much of the media said that I was tough, very tough and nasty to foreign leaders. And I really wasn't at all. But I did say you have to pay up.
Well, you talked about Europe as a foe. you talked about Vladimir Putin as a foe, and you clarified that means a competitor. Similarly, the media is upset, you say, an enemy of the people. Aren't you really saying that they're not doing their job? And
well, when I say enemy of the people, I'm not talking about all the media. I'm talking about there is a big percentage of media. When you look at CNN, how false their reports are. When you look at NBC and some of the others, when you read the New York Times, it's just story after story after story. That's just a negative spin. And we're doing great things. We have the greatest economy in the history of our country. We have the best unemployment numbers in the history of our country, best African-American unemployment numbers in history, Hispanic numbers in history, women's numbers in history.
14 states have records.
14 states, I didn't know that.
Record low unemployment.
I'm surprised it's only 14, actually. That's a disappointing number.
Well, you keep working hard. I think it'll get there. But the more amazing thing, too, is we have more jobs available than we actually have people on unemployment. And the labor participation rate in the country has never been higher.
First time.
Let me go back, because everybody in the media is so focused on this. In 2014, in the Washington Times, Devin Nunes said with a certainty that Russia would try to impact the 2016 elections. Barack Obama, in the month before the 2016 elections, and I will read and I will quote, no serious person out there would suggest that somehow you could even rig America's elections. No evidence that it has happened in the past, which is not true. And number two, or that it could happen in this election. And I invite Mr. Trump to stop whining and to go out there and try and get votes. He said that 2 weeks before the election.
Well, he thought Hillary Clinton was going to win, and he didn't want to do anything to disturb it. And, you know, frankly, when I won, he said, this is the biggest deal. But before I won, he said, this is nothing and it can't happen. It's a very dishonest deal. And, you know, you have to find out who did Peter Strzok report to, because it was Comey and it was McCabe, but it was also probably Obama. If you think that Obama didn't know what was going, when you watch, and I said it today with President Putin, when you watch Peter Strzok's performance, the lover of Lisa Page, when you watch that performance, the FBI, I'll tell you, I know so many people in the FBI, these are incredible people, what they're going through watching this guy, a total phony. I mean, how about we'll stop it? Or something to that effect.
He said, we will stop you.
Yeah, well.
We'll stop him.
And then.
Insurance
and
policy.
He said, originally, I guess it was the two of them. No. Then he said the next day, well, I meant the American people. And even the Democrats say, that doesn't work.
Yeah. Reports Lisa Page contradicted him and gave a more honest assessment.
I heard she did much better than he did, and she was honest and took a lot of hard shots, but at least she was honest about it. He's a disgrace to our country. He's a disgrace to the great FBI, a disgrace. And how he's still being paid is beyond belief.
Did you like President Putin's idea? Robert Mueller should go talk to him. Because
I was fascinated by it. So they have a treaty where they work together with the United States, because everyone said we don't have an extradition treaty, but they have a treaty where they work together. And his prosecutors would prosecute it, and he said that Robert Mueller's people could go with them, but they probably won't want to.
Yeah, interesting. Let me ask.
The 13 angry Democrats, you think they're going to want to go? I don't think so.
And, of course, his pit bull, Andrew Weissman, who I think has a pretty atrocious record that we have found.
It's very sad what's happening to our country because of this. We've never done better in so many ways, including economically. But when you see this thing going on, and I will tell you, it's driven a wedge between us and Russia. Maybe we've just knocked down that wedge, but it has driven a wedge. And President Putin said that. One of the early things he said when we started, he said, it's really a shame because we could do so much good, whether it's humanitarian aid throughout the Middle East, whether it's not just Syria, so many different things. The safety of nuclear, which is ultimately, there's nothing bigger, nothing more important. And they drove a phony wedge, just a phony witch hunt, rigged deal with guys like Peter Strzok and Comey and McCabe.
Strzok, Page.
The whole group, and you can imagine who else. It's a real shame.
And there was Russia interference. Hillary paid through a law firm, a investigator group, Fusion GPS. They hired a foreign national that put together a Russian dossier that was used to lie about you, which, by the way, Putin confirmed today. He didn't have such information on you, apparently.
He knew exactly about it because he's been seeing it. It makes him angry when he sees it. And, it's very interesting. You look at what's happening and you look at what that whole thing, he understood it. And he was, I don't know if you could see it, he was incensed even talking about it. But he's willing to take those 12 people. There is no extradition. But he's willing to let Robert Mueller's people go over there and bring a big investigation of those people, working together with Russian investigators.
Last question, because I know you got a lot to do, and you just finished a busy day. You've now been in 21 countries since January of 2017. Like North Korea, you were very clear in saying that this is a process. Where would you like to be in a year, both with North Korea and with Russia?
Well, I think we're doing really well with Russia as of today. I thought we were doing horribly before today. Really, I mean horribly, dangerously.
It was that big, that dramatic today?
Oh, I think it was great today, but I think it was really bad 5 hours ago. I think we really had a potential problem. Don't forget, we're two nuclear nations. 90% of the nuclear power in the world between these two nations. And we've had a phony witch hunt deal drive us apart.
This is the biggest wedge. This was the biggest wedge.
It's the thing that he told me when he went in. He said, what a shame. He felt it was very hard for me to make a deal because of, all of this nonsense in much of the case.
He used the word nonsense.
You have to understand, you take a look and you look at all of these people. I mean, some were hackers, some of them, then, they 14 people, then they have 12 people. These aren't 12 people involved in the campaign. Then you had many other people, some told a lie. You look at Flynn, it's a shame. But the FBI didn't think he was lying. With Paul Manafort, who really is a nice man, you look at what's going on with him, it's like Al Capone.
2005 tax case.
Or a case that I guess is very old. It's just a sad thing. It's a very sad thing for our country to see this.
Mr. President, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. All right, when we come back from Helsinki, Finland, Sebastian Gorka, Sarah Carter, Daniel Hoffman all react to my interview with President Trump and today's summit between the president and Vladimir Putin. As we continue, straight ahead.
Once again, President Trump mentioned the issue of the so-called interference of Russia in the American elections, and I had to reiterate things I said several times, including during our personal contacts, that the Russian state has never interfered and is not going to interfere into internal American affairs, including election process. Any specific material, if such things arise, we are ready to analyze together.
All right, that was Vladimir Putin earlier today denying Russia interfered in the 2016 election. Here now with reaction on set, the author of the book, Why We Fight. Well, he's actually in Washington. Fox News national security strategist, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, Fox News chief national correspondent, Ed Henry, Fox News contributors, Sarah Carter, Daniel Hoffman. Sarah, I want to start with you because the media and the left in this country is in the middle of what can only be described as a collective meltdown, starting with John Brennan calling this summit treasonous, Nancy Pelosi, Jeff Flake. And here's the reality. If Vladimir Putin had what they said, it would have been out by now. There's no way. But it doesn't stop the conspiracy theories and the idea that somehow that President Trump, who's not dropping $150 billion in cash and other currency to talk to on a variety of issues, the two biggest nuclear powers, is a bad thing. Without the bribery, I'm happy.
Well, a terrorist nation like Iran, moving money to Iran when everybody knew that the Iranians were probably one of the most aided and abetted terrorists throughout the globe in the killing of Americans. It's extraordinary. Now they're going after him. But let me go back to Brennan, Sean. It's extraordinary to me that the ex-CIA director calls the president of the United States actions treasonous when his actions border on sedition.
The guy that voted for a communist, a former communist, became the CIA director under Obama. By the way, all of this happened on their watch. We need to remind everybody, all of it.
Very dangerous.
Brennan may be embarrassed over the fact, you're right, that in the Obama administration he may have things to hide over the FISA warrants of Carter Page, how that was done, the intelligence. Just wait. Okay, you seem to have something. The dossier, how that was handled, what people said under oath. I get all that. And I heard your monologue very closely. And I think you're right that Peter Strzok has things to answer for. I think where's the DNC server, as the president said. All that can be true.
And the 33,000 emails.
Okay. And it also may be true that not a single action by Russia changed a single vote. And so that there was no impact on the president winning fair and square. I'll give you all that. Nonetheless, Sean, the president missed a golden opportunity today. I've got to be direct in saying, in having Vladimir Putin there and just to his face saying, knock it off, stay out. It doesn't mean it affected the election.
I just interviewed the president. Yeah. And the president said it did come up. Here's the problem, is it happened in 08. It's happened as everybody in Congress has now said it happened before, and it's probably going to happen again. But for Barack Obama to say no serious person believes this can happen, that was 2 weeks before the election.
I'm telling you, I think John Brennan and Barack Obama have a lot to answer for. But Donald Trump today had a chance to say enough is enough.
Ed, you weren't in the room with them, and that's the point. No. And Vladimir Putin, listen, I'm all in favor. I did like the idea, and I thought this was interesting, that the president is saying Putin had a good idea. Let Mueller's people go interview them. All for it. And by the way, the same Barack Obama that tried to oust the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu through election interference, as if this doesn't happen everywhere, every day, as Rand Paul has said.
I think the concern.
It looks like you're being very thoughtful here.
Yeah, I sure am. I'll tell you, my concern is this. The president's own DNI director, Dan Coates, has said the system is blinking red. He's really concerned about election meddling.
Everyone should be.
In 2018. And I agree with Ed. There was an opportunity to throttle Putin right in front of all of us today. And I wonder whether that was a missed opportunity for the president.
But the president, Dr. Gorka, was very clear in saying this has been the biggest wedge between the two countries. Nobody knows what was said privately between them. Putin is denying it. You know, the idea that he has something. But here's, I think, the most important part that we've got to get into, and that is, at some point, we need to have the specific evidence. And the double standard is glaring in this particular case, as it relates to the servers, as it relates to the emails that are missing. And at some point, we've got to say, where is this evidence as well? Because we want to know who knew what, when, and where.
Look, Sean, let me address the question of how everybody's reacting to the presser on the left. But first, a reminder with regards to what you mentioned earlier. John Brennan, who's accusing the president of being a traitor, voted for the Communist Party at the height of the Cold War in 1976, when the Soviet Union actually wanted to destroy America. That's treasonous. Vladimir Putin is a bad guy. He's a bad actor. But the Russian Federation is not the Soviet Union. And as far as I know, Donald Trump never voted for the Communist Party at the height of the Cold War. So let's just put that on the record. With regard to the reactions to today's Strzok testimony, you saw the unveiling of the deep state last week with Strzok's testimony. Today, you really saw the depths of the mainstream media. Nobody in that room behaved like a journalist. They were like members of MoveOn.org or the Resistance. The idea that we had a chance to talk about big issues, saving hundreds of thousands of lives in Syria, the question of Ukraine's national sovereignty, and instead they want to perpetuate this bogus collusion narrative. They came out of the closet. There is no journalism on the mainstream media left, and it was absolutely shambolic.
We'll take a break. More from Helsinki, Finland, as we continue.